But you were introducing the question from Eva Sullivan. Go ahead.
Yes. Why do denominations not have elders? And what a great question, because I've often asked that question myself a lot of times to different denominations. In fact, it goes back to you were talking about the lectureship. That was part of my lesson that I talked about, is the different forms of government, if you will, or how the church operates. And if you go and you look at the various denominations, they have all kinds of names for the different people who are in those offices. And very seldom, almost never, do you see the word elder. What's more, to me, is quite comical. And I certainly don't mean this in a derogatory sense, but it is rather comical to me, for those who really study the Bible, is to see an 18-year-old knock on my door,
Call himself an elder.
and call himself an elder. And I've studied with many of them, and I've asked them over and over, why do you call yourself an elder whenever that word, just the word itself, means older? And they've got some excuses that they use, and some way that they twist scriptures, and through their Book of Mormon that they use. But why do denominations not have elders? I think probably the easiest way to answer that is, man likes hierarchies. They like to have control. And so over the course of history, an elder wound up being over all the other elders. And then that turned into having a regional area that they were over. And then that turned into what we have today in all the different headquarters, all the different ways of overseeing the different denominations, their churches and stuff. And so they've just gotten away from that. And if you stick to the Bible term and the Bible way of an elder, then you're contradictory to the scriptures, unfortunately.
Exactly. I mean, and the
For them,
the phrase is, call Bible things by Bible names.
Yes.
Was done to try and bring about a unity.
Yes.
And restoring the idea of New Testament Christianity. So we make sure that we follow, it's just simpler to call it what the Bible calls it. And so that's why we try and have elders and oversee. And you don't, part of the digression, and I would really encourage you to go to the NWFSBS YouTube page, and you can see about like the ecumenical councils, when they started creating these councils that were outside the concept of biblical autonomous elderships. That's when it started creating all sorts of falsehoods.
That's right.
And leading us away from New Testament Christianity.
In fact, if you watch the lesson that I'm going to be presenting in the lectureship, it will cover a lot of that. In fact, it answers the question of why they don't have elderships.
Exactly. All right. You introduced it to us a moment ago, so I'll just say it, because you said, these 18-year-old kids knock on the door and say, I'm elder so-and-so.
Okay.
All right. How old is a man to be an elder? What age?
You can't define it. There's not a specific age that.
I agree with you there. But.
Yeah, there's not a specific age. But, it also depends on the culture. You look at the Jewish culture where a lot of this comes from, those men are you look at people like Abraham and the people who wound up being the oldest and the patriarchs of the family.
And old to them, though, was completely different than old in New Testament times.
Yes.
And so that's where you got to kind of look at it as saying, all right, and I think that's where 1 Timothy 3 comes in.
Okay.
And the qualifications of an elder. Mm-hmm. It's a man that has children. He's shown himself in the, he's old enough to have been married, to have his children, to raise them. And, has he the experience? Because that's what's implied in there.
That's
too.
Perfect. That's perfect.
And I think sometimes we have to be careful, because when we think elder, we think old, over the hill. But that's not necessarily
that's right.
the case. It's just he is experienced, having met these qualifications. And we need to embrace all these ages. But remember, there was a passing patriarchally where once they got to a certain point, they would actually say, here to that next generation. I think lots of prime example of that with Abraham. not Lot, I'm sorry. Abraham's father. Terah. Yeah. Terah, because you notice how he went with Abraham, and it was as if he was under Abraham's household at that point in time. Sometimes that patriarchy is passed before the man is beyond being able to be useful, but it's that passing on.